Okay, this one, every time I get super pumped when I know the person behind the topic. Like, I know Jeff Hiatt, and man, this one's gonna be fun because Jeff's got a special skill set that isn't necessarily quite what we're used to here at the Capital Shift because stewards are used to me introducing operators to them that represent an asset class that maybe Stewart might want to think about investing in. But today, I decided that I needed to bring all of the stewards to the doctor. And we're going to introduce Stewart to the doctor because Jeff Hyatt, as the depreciation doctor, actually has a very unique skill set. So, Jeff, before we get into introducing yourself and your credentials and why everybody needs to know why they should pay attention to the depreciation doctor, let me tell you about Stewart. You know a little bit about Stewart, but let me represent the patient for you in a moment. Patient Stewart has he's got some environmental factors and some symptoms, doctor, and he makes lots of money. So he's he's very flush with money. So money's not really the issue here, but lots of stock exposure, like significant investments in the stock market, but maybe even more importantly, and more on their mind, Stewart often gets stock RSUs from their employers, which is actual stock. So there's a lot of volatility in the stock market, and that creates a lot of volatility for them. They're paying so much in taxes. Oh my God, Jeff, there's doctor. If there's pain, that's like, when you ask what level of pain, that's like a 10. I'm in level 10 tax pain. So they're stressed out by every market swing. And like if the company misses earnings, like, oh my God, that's terrible. We're constantly checking the stock portfolio to see how we did today, right? So they're totally stressed out, totally stressed out. But they're also very smart. Stewart's very smart. And so I'm gonna do the research someday, doctor. I'm gonna I'm gonna go out there onto the Claudes or the Gemini in this instance, maybe the Grok, who knows? Meta, who knows? Like Manus. But I'm going on one of the things and I'm gonna go talk about my symptoms because I'm smart and it'll tell me what to do. And then eventually someday I'll just not have any of these problems anymore. So that's Stewart. You're the doctor. Let's talk about your experience, what you do, and then how that's going to apply to all of these other asset classes and operators that we are going to continue to interview at the Capital Shift. Jeff Hyatt, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much. What an intro. What a what a what a great I'll call it a preamble there.
Heck
So
yeah.
thank you very much for that, Roger. That's very nice of you.
Setting the table, buddy. We're setting the table.
Right, right. This is great. So um well, for your patient, well, first of all, I got to call out that we have matching ceilings, which is just insane, but it's kind of funny. So s- slight difference, but both tin ceilings. So anyway,
You betcha.
um Uh, for good old Stuart, my question would be to that person, um, the risk that everything you've described is, um, are risk components and just going to be attributes of owning something that you don't control. I mean, ultimately, many of these folks are going to be employees at XYZ company, whatever that company happens to be. But when it when the rubber hits the road, they don't control the outcome. So, what I would say to them, what if there was an asset out there? What if there was an asset class out there that wasn't as volatile? Because X, Y, or Z happens to company ABC, and all of a sudden, there were some fast food restaurants, a number of probably now a couple of decades ago, but they had an E. coli outbreak and it hurt the entire national brand. Now, that puts people that own stock in that company at risk. Typically, and there's a saying out there, so I'm gonna pause what I was just the path I was going down. I'm gonna pause that for a second and say, there's a saying that goes, if you're a hammer, everything
Hmm.
is a nail.
Sure.
Okay. So to me, I'm a hammer on real estate and taxes. So I'm going to relate stuff to real estate and taxes. Okay. So, in my opinion, which this is not the doctor's opinion, this is Jeff's opinion,
Okay.
real estate is such an unbelievable asset. What else can you buy in the market? If I wanted to go out and buy the whatever the company that Stewart works for, whatever company that is, if I wanted to go buy shares in that company and I wanted to buy $1 million worth of shares today, Roger, how much money would I have to come up with?
A multiple of $1 million.
A million bucks. I would have to come up with a million to buy that, forgetting about margin and all that. But for the most part, I'm going to have to come up with $1 million. But what if I wanted to buy $1 million property?
Yes.
How much do I have to come up with? Maybe
Significantly
as
less.
low as, pardon me?
Significantly less.
It could be, depending on what you're buying and when you're buying it and all that, probably 20 to 30%. So now I can buy the $1 million asset and I get to buy it for a lot less down. I get all kinds of tax benefits. I get the appreciation. It's very unlikely, if you do a good job buying the property on the way in, meaning you're not buying someplace that is ready to fall down.
Sure.
It's very unlikely for it to go to zero. But the folks that had that stock in the E. coli company, their stock didn't go to zero, but man, it took a hit and it took years to come
Sure.
back.
Sure.
With real estate, I would my position would be you don't have that same amount of risk because, again, if you're buying it right going in, then it's probably not going to go down as dramatically. It could take a hit for a while, but it will typically come back. You
Yeah.
get the tax benefits, you get the appreciation over time. You get then potentially, depending on where you're buying, you've got the ability to go visit that property, which now gives you, if you're buying it in a place that you want to be in, i.e., maybe you live up north, like, Roger, you're in Michigan, I'm in New Hampshire. Maybe, we want to buy a place as an investment property in a sunny place. And so that gives us the ability to travel there to check on our investment. And that gives us deductions. Again, I'm the hammer and the nail. So I'm looking for the tax angles all the time, which are legitimate. I'm not going out on some limb that's aggressive as anything. I'm staying right in the middle of the road here. But if you own assets in another part of the country and you want to check on them, that could be part of your rationale for, um, taking deductions for that trip.
I feel compelled to share with the crowd, uh, those of you who are following Roger and Melissa Burnett's story closely at all, you will know that we purchased a home in Sedona at the end of 2025, and thanks to Jeff and his team at MSC, we've been able to realize a pretty significant tax savings. So when I'm talking to folks about this, it's from a learned perspective, and I'm actually inviting the person who taught me to come talk to all of you about how the doctor treats his patients in ways that then can alleviate your symptoms. So you've got some background in this. We don't want to send anybody out to AI to go figure out who Jeff Hiatt is. You want to talk about like all those letters behind your name and everything that goes along with all of that.
Well, I wish there were more letters behind my names, but they're not, because to me that was going to take extra time away from
Sure.
doing business. So, bottom line is, our firm has been doing cost segregation studies since 1996. That's when it first came out. Um, and it was like this weird, nichey thing back then, because the first court case came out in 96. but it had transpired beginning in '86 under the Tax Reform Act of '86. I joined the firm in '99. I was basically the third person in. Prior to me joining, it was an engineer and a CPA only. And then in '02, we got referred in to the folks that had just around the Boston area bought a big defense contractor facility in a sale leaseback. The
Mhm.
tenant was going to stay on. They had previously owned it. They sold it to the buyers, and the buyers were going to hold it while the tenant moved to another facility a few years later. They had to build it, but the sellers wanted to get it off their books. Okay, great. So we did that cost seg, saved those buyers about 4 million bucks of income tax. And their CPA saw the results and said, "Oh my gosh, this is incredible. You have to do a seminar for the Mass Society of CPAs." And in February of '03, we did a seminar, had about 85 CPAs come, and we went from doing 5 or 10 projects a year to doing a couple of hundred. Now that was 3 of us back then. Fast forward to today, we do 15 to 1,600 studies a year. We have 38 employees. We have 6 offices throughout the country, so we can get to most places pretty quickly. Um, and so that's kind of what we do. Because we've now done 28,000 studies, part of our value proposition is to provide as accurate as possible, but conservative, um, estimates of tax benefit before you
Yeah.
spend a nickel. And
Yep.
that's what we did with you and Melissa, Roger. We gave you an estimate. We said, "Hey, this is what we know for sure we can hit, but it's likely we're gonna do better than that." And we came in nicely above
Nicely
what we
above.
projected.
Not to
So
mention that the additional opportunity that your expertise has created for us to allow us yet another opportunity for a tax event at the same address,
right.
just because
Because
we've decided to make improvements to the property. So
bingo.
really, really, really clutch to know just when even when you're structuring a transaction like we were, to know that when you're doing your write up and analysis of the deal, you could make a decision, a really uninformed decision, because you've not added this consideration into the calculations. Yeah?
Oh, yeah. I mean, do you want me to get into that?
All right. So, Jeff, here's what you and I know about investors. Stewards might not even know this yet. We're just going to tell Stuart now so that when they're watching this episode, maybe they'll rewatch it later when they realize, like, oh my God, they were right. So, their primary problem is tax, period. Okay. So, we're going to start with the prism of tax. And I'm going to allow you to pontificate on each of the different asset classes and how you perceive them to perform in that category. I'd even, if you want to try to rank, like if you feel like there's top three, that would be that would make the most sense if someone was really interested. But here's the kicker. And this is what I want you to be thinking about. The investors will come back after we've solved the tax problem and go, but I want some income. Or I'm really like, it's a long play. This capital is it's got long play upside to it. So I'm looking for an equity multiple in addition to tax. Like, so usually there's like the primary, but then we've got a secondary. So I think it gives you a chance to sort of address the primary, obviously. But then if you feel like there's nuance in that asset class that also applies to one of the other compass points, feel free to touch on those as well. Does that make sense?
Right. Perfect.
Cool. All right. So Stewart's big dang tax problem. Doc, what are we doing?
Okay. There's a couple of ways and couple of ways to address it, a couple of considerations to have. Okay. Without changing anything you've given me to play with there, okay? Um, the probably in my understanding of good old Stewart is that they work for that person, let's say one person of a couple works for a given company and there's lots of stock floating around.
Mhm.
Um, because of that, and let's say if there is a spouse, the other spouse has maybe works at the same company or works elsewhere, W-2 or 1099 job. Probably the cleanest thing for them to do under this scenario, if they heard what I was saying about, hey, how else can you leverage and buy $1 million property for a heck of a lot less? What else can you do with it? Probably the cleanest thing to do would be to do short-term rental. And, we know folks that are specialists in that space, and they help people get into short-term rentals. Okay, great. What's the deal there? Because there's talk on the internet all over social media. What they say is the short-term rental loophole, the short-term rental, fix or whatever. The folks on social media talk about things to get clicks, of course. I mean,
Right.
that's what social media is all about. And so
Right.
if the person hearing the message hears something and they're thinking, oh, I got a tax problem, and now there's this loophole, they listen in because they go, wow, there's something out there that I don't know about, that nobody really knows about. The IRS hasn't even figured it out yet, but it's not a loophole.
No,
I don't call
it
it
is
that when I
not.
refer to it. It's not a loophole. It's part of the tax code, for Pete's sake. But it sounds sexier to say
Sure.
it's a loophole, so people
Sure.
click. But
Yeah.
the deal is, I call it the short-term rental advantage. And what you need to understand there is a couple of things. Short-term rentals, a lot of people, okay, and I'll give you a scenario in short-term rental. Roger and Melissa go out and they buy two properties. They're side by side. They were built by the same builder, the exact same time. So let's say 15 years ago. But Roger and Melissa are buying it, buying them both, and they pay the exact same for both properties. But one, for whatever reason, they're going to rent out long term. Maybe they've got a buddy who wants to rent that place and he just wants to be in that neighborhood. Okay, great. So they rent to that person long term, meaning, let's say, a year lease at a time. Okay, great. Well, that becomes a 27 and a half year residential rental property. But the very same building that's identical to it, right next door, that they bought the same day and they paid the exact same price for it, they're going to rent that one out short-term rental because for whatever reason, there's some thing that they want to do that they call a cool short-term rental opportunity. And so they do that one short-term rental. And you go, okay, what's the diff? They're the same building. They're going to have the same depreciable life. No, because it's short-term rental, it's 39-year life. So it's treated in the tax code not like residential rental, which is the only asset class out there. Residential rental is the only asset class out there that has a shorter life than 39 years.
Right.
Why is that? Because the apartment rental lobby in DC is very, very strong. And they were able to prevail to the legislature and the IRS and all of that, that people that rent out apartments should get a faster life than people renting out office buildings or restaurants or any other asset class. So everything else is 39-year except residential rental. I say that because that's going to become a part of the conversation here in a moment. You go from there, okay, it's 39-year because it's treated like a hotel. Because a hotel, for the most part, oftentimes, depending on who's owning it and how it's being managed, is going to be what they consider an active trade or business. Okay. So a short-term rental, when it's being managed by Stuart and the spouse, and or they get to claim it against the losses from that property, from that short-term rental. They get to claim the losses against not only the income from the short-term rental, but also any excess losses spill over and wipe out income tax on their day job income. So that becomes a really nice tool, an advantage, quote unquote, loophole, is that they're getting to use the losses from the short-term rental not only against income from the property, but also from their day job income, as opposed to going back to the other property that's right next door. um, for Roger and Melissa, the losses created via cost seg on that property would wipe out the income tax on that property's
Yeah.
income, but it would not spill over and wipe out Roger and Melissa's day job
Mhm.
because it's called passive. So for apartments, you're talking about passive income. For anything else in this scenario with short-term rental, it's going to be considered active. That's a beautiful thing about that. There's also some other nuance that if Roger and Melissa decided to spend 50 grand fixing up both bathrooms, so now they're going to spend 100 grand, 50 grand on the apartment, 50 grand on the short-term rental to fix up the bathrooms, make them super deluxe, add spas, add whatever the heck goes into fancy bathrooms. You're spending that 50 grand on both of them. For the apartment, that 50 grand is going to become 27 and a half year asset class. But for the short-term rental, that 50 grand falls in what they call QIP, qualified improvement property, which has a 15-year life, which becomes immediately depreciable under bonus depreciation. So now you've gotten a second grab on the benefit of short-term rental, is that you're calling it QIP for that improvement, and now you get to take that deduction immediately. The third on, now this would apply to both, is that if the cost seg was done properly on the apartment and the next door short-term rental, we've identified the values within the bathroom. We put values where most providers out there ignore anything that has a long life because it doesn't help Roger and Melissa today take write-offs, so they ignore it. But we don't, because my partners are CPAs. So they kind of get the overall big picture. So we put values on the bathrooms so that down the road, when Roger and Melissa decide to gut that bathroom and throw it in a dumpster for both properties, they put the new money in now because our report identified the value of the first bathroom and it's in a dumpster. Roger and Melissa get to take another bite at the tax apple and take abandonment losses on the items in the dumpster from the bathroom.
So, just as a quick aside for you paid Voyager members, one of the next upcoming Decision Desk live teardowns is going to be us walking through what we're expecting from Jeff's literally talking about the project that we're doing in Sedona right now. He's talking about a live project. So, we've got an analysis going right now on what that might entail from a benefit perspective, and I can assure you the cost investment versus the benefit is it's a no-brainer. So, it's really more a matter of us being able to explain this in greater detail in future pieces of content so that if you really wanna learn this inside out, there's ways because we've gone ahead and done the work to be able to afford the community the opportunity to get a peek of what that looks like, right? So, you've crushed this thing. The only one that you and I both know, and I'll just layer this in for a moment because this is a key segue, I think, for you. So, I had Tom Rowan on, and we were talking about this exact topic, the short-term rental advantage, and
Thank you.
what Tom wanted to remind the stewards out there is that you are actually buying a hospitality business when you do a short-term rental. And if you don't have someone within your family that can meet the objective of managing that well and managing it properly, one, you don't get the actual hours necessary, which is a whole separate topic that we'll just kinda like if people wanna know, we can give them ways to figure that piece of it out, and more real-wise content covers sort of the hours qualifying need, but more importantly, buy a short-term rental and mismanage it and watch how much it costs you. So knowing that, doctor, that that's a side effect of that remedy for this tax problem, what might be some other tax efficient asset classes that stewards might wanna know about that don't necessarily have that same symptom or side effect, but maybe have some other side effects that come along with those?
Okay, so um, we've been doing this long enough. So I've been deep in the real estate space, and my wife and I are also real estate investors. So we own a bunch of apartment doors, some directly, some with partners through syndications and all of that stuff. We own industrial, we own uh, self storage, we own a car wash, we own all kinds of different stuff. Okay. Um, so I would say that over time, because I've been in this business for so long, we've seen kind of the rise and fall, the ebbs and flows of different asset classes.
Sure,
At
sure,
one point, office was the hot thing.
for sure.
Everybody was buying office, and that's where the money was flooding into. And I would say to you and your uh, stewards here, um, that we are a lagging economic indicator, meaning we don't a mortgage person sees stuff coming in before it becomes hot. They see all of a sudden all of these deals are coming in for office or apartment or hotel, whatever the asset class is. So they're on the front end. We're on the back end, meaning we don't hear about stuff until the deal is closed and usually until our real estate investor wakes up on March 10th and goes, "Oh crap, I got to talk to my accountant and tell him I bought that building last year." And on March 10th, we find out and via the CPA, oh, Fred just bought this hotel or Fred just bought this whatever. So, I would say we're lagging. But, right now, the hotter topics are going to be residential, meaning normal apartment type facilities, whether that's single family residential or duplex, um, or, quads or, anything bigger. Um, those are hot. Um, office is down, because there's a lot of post-COVID vacancy, and that still is shaking itself out of the world of what that's gonna look like. In certain states, there's talk of, uh, rent caps, and so some municipalities are talking about converting these vacant office buildings into residential, but
Yeah,
that is such a beast in and of itself.
right,
Like, how does that become viable? Like,
right.
to add 50 or, 30 bathrooms on a floor, and I mean, you gotta buy that building so cheap that it's insane. Yeah, I don't know how and then throw onto that the conversation about rent control, and it becomes almost I don't know where that goes. So, um, anyway, residential is a hotter topic right now because it is, very viable. Now, um, I'll tell you a story, and, it's kind of an interesting little th gem. I had a client who was a very, very successful, um, surgeon, a brain surgeon, actually. So, very successful. He made 4 to 5 million bucks a year in brain surgery. And he took his excess dough and he would buy bigger industrial properties, commercial industrial warehouse kind of stuff, nothing that had lots of tenants calling him all the time. It was commercial stuff and all was good with the world. And we did his cost seg work probably 6, 7 years ago. And we did 4 or 5 of the big buildings he had. And he was making about $1 million a year in income from those properties on top of his 4 to 5 mil a year from his day job of brain surgery. All is good a couple years go by after we've done the cost seg. We delivered great results for him. He was thrilled. His accountant was thrilled. We came to the dance with him through his accountant. So it couldn't have been better. Then uh, he calls me up about 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, and he is irate. He's like, I think you guys are doing this cost seg thing wrong. What are you doing? I should be real estate professional. I should be able to take this against my day job income, and you're not letting me do that. And I think you're doing this wrong. Blah, blah, blah. And he was all over me. And I was like, I'm going to change his name. I was like, Fred, um, uh, you know, our results won't change if you're a real estate professional or not a real estate professional. Our results are going to stay the same. The question is, what is your accountant? How do they apply this to your tax return? So let's get your accountant on a Zoom call. And we did. We scheduled it, got the accountant on. And so I let Fred, go ahead and say his stuff. And so the accountant said back to him, so Fred, the scenario you're painting here is that you're going to sit down with the IRS and tell them that your primary job is real estate
Yeah.
management and real estate investment, and you make 800 to $1 million a year doing that. And this thing you call brain surgery, where you make 4 to 5 million, is just kind of a side hustle, is what you're going to say to the IRS with a straight face. And Fred said at that point, he kind of like danced around. He was like, well, when you put it that way, no, probably not. So it went away, but he had started, and I forgot to mention this earlier. He had started with, I've been doing a lot of research. I've been doing a lot of
Sure.
research. I
Yeah.
said, okay, Fred, now that we've covered this, what kind of research have you been doing? And he goes, I'll send you the Facebook link. I'll
There
get
you
it to
go.
you. You
There
can
you
look at it.
go.
And I was like, are you kidding me? This guy is getting his advice. A brain surgeon is getting his advice from some dude on Facebook.
Saw it on the internet,
And
Jeff.
it's got to be true.
I
It's
saw
got
it
to
on
be.
the internet. It's gotta be true.
So,
Well,
but
and I think that's good advice for if we said that one of Stewart's symptoms is this, uh, inability to move to action because of exactly what you just described. I'm too smart. I will figure this out eventually, and so you lose out on all the opportunity that you could have had with the income that you have today because eventually you were gonna figure it out. So
Well, but here's the great thing though. Here is ultimately the deal. Um, what our friend Fred did was he began to hand off the management to his spouse. And so his spouse became the real estate
yeah,
professional.
yeah,
And because the spouse spent enough time being the real estate professional, then the income that the deductions from the cost seg go to wipe out not only the income from the property first, but then goes to wipe out the married filing jointly couples um, information. And so it wipes out the tax on his income as well, because married filing jointly, real estate professional. There are some distinctions and hurdles you got to get over for that, but
for
it
sure.
is something that worked.
Well, and I mean, the Burnett family, that Roger is the real estate professional, Melissa is the Googler. We are the very embodiment of that which you speak, and, my business is managing our real estate investments and then running the real community. So between and amongst them, I'm getting more than the 500 hours that are necessary, so it works out pretty good. So, Jeff, let me
That's
ask
great.
you this from a doctor's perspective. Recently, we've had on TJ with a debt fund and an equity fund. We just had Tim Woodbridge on with mobile home parks. Arthur has been on with self storage, particularly when it comes to opportunity zone. Tom's been on for triple net lease. So we've kind of run the gamut of the tax optimized asset classes. When I talk to you about that short list, knowing that we know that all of those come with some relative tax efficiency, are there any little nuggets of value that you want to attach to any of those asset classes that I just mentioned from the depreciation doctor's perspective?
Sure, sure. Um, the great thing is, you know, self-storage can be a phenomenal, asset class because, you've got a lot of stuff inside of the building that is just needed to be there for running of the business.
Mhm.
Um, and that, those, any accoutrements that go along with the self-storage business can go into a faster life. That can be phenomenal. And it's really, really phenomenal when you can take an old building and renovate it and make it self-storage. We've seen phenomenal results when somebody takes, let's say, an older, let's say, Kmart building
Mhm.
or older, you know,
Any
vacated
retail.
any retail, thank you. Any retail out there, that they can make self-storage because you've already got the structure, and now so much of it going in is gonna go into that faster life. So that's a smoking deal. Um, Triple net leases are good because typically the accoutrements that come in that building are already there. You as the buyer are not having to, let's say, put them all in there, and you could take accelerated depreciation on a lot of those items. So Tom Rowan's scenario is very good as well with triple net properties. We do them all the time. Um, TJ with Point, they do a great job with putting together a lot of residential stuff. Typically, is what I've seen them focused on, and it works very well there for the typical 27 and a half year apartment properties. So all of these can be really, really good. It just depends if you're buying something that is, I'll say, really, really baseline, the minimum, low, I'll say low value, then it's harder to get better results. But as you get bigger numbers in there and more improvements, the cost seg reallocations become even better then too. Um, if does that make sense?
Yeah,
And
for sure.
did
All
I
right.
answer your question?
All right. So we got what if you were, so you're writing me prescriptions right now. You're writing Stewart prescriptions, right? You take a whole dose of self storage and you can, so, what would you say, Stewart, avoid under all conditions? Do not do this. What would you caution people against?
Okay. So again, hammer, nail kind of
Sure.
thing. Um, what people can do, they can often get into this, I'm going to call it trap or treadmill of they buy a property, they pretty it up. They call it fixing and flip. Probably Stuart already knows that phrase. So you're fixing and flipping and you're fixing and flipping. If you're doing the fix and flips, and you do cost seg on them. Typically, the cost seg won't work for fix and flips because it's treated like inventory. It's not treated as an asset for you to depreciate. So that's number one. But let's say you're in that phase of always fixing and flipping. Well, if you end up retaining some of those, that's great. Just remember at the time you sell, the best outcome is probably going to be a 1031 where you go ahead and defer the gain on that and you end up doing the 1031. And if you've already done the cost seg, you've extracted the tax benefit out of it today, and then it rolls into the next property too. And potentially, depending on what you're buying and you hit the 1031 requirements, you're going to get the ability to do a cost seg on the acquired property as well. So that can work out nicely. Um, the time you wouldn't want to do it is if Stewart has a situation where they've got losses and probably by your definition of Stewart in the beginning, this is not going to be the case, but assuming it was a possible thing, if they're not paying much tax, it probably doesn't make sense to do this. My scenario, the cost seg thing, because if they're not paying tax, they don't need the losses that we create. And what we try to steer people away from is using the losses now, let's say, in a lower tax bracket year versus waiting until down the road. If they've got a partner, a business partner, and they know for sure they're going to be buying out that partner, then they probably want to wait on doing the cost seg until they own it completely versus doing it if they were 50-50 partners and they do it today, then the benefit is going to get split 50-50. But if they know the partner is departing, then hold off on the cost seg until it's going to become all their benefit down the road.
Mhm.
I'm trying to think of other things that would negate, it when it's really good to do is if somebody owns a property and they're gonna theoretically hold it for a while, one of the conversation points, especially now going back to our friend Stuart, um, if they're thinking of their overall estate, generational wealth kind of thing, they might be thinking, "Okay, we're gonna do this, um, this plan, and we got to start to parse up the assets and put them in different trusts and get them out of our names and all this other stuff." Depending on what is going on and how they're trying to do it, there can be a play where they do the cost seg on the building they own today. They extract the value from that transaction, some from the cost seg out of the building they own now. They get that. And then 5 or 7 or 10 years later, they pass on. And now that property goes from generation 1 to generation 2.
Right?
Generation 2 gets what they call a step up in basis. And all of that recapture that would have otherwise come into play with a cost seg, um, if they didn't do a 1031, evaporates. So it can be a really good plan for generation 1 to extract the tax benefit today.
Mhm.
And that down the road, if that property is going to go to generation 2, bam, it goes there. They get the step up. It's been 5 or 7 or 10 years. They get to do a cost seg on that property as well. So that can be a really smoking tool there.
Ladies and gentlemen in the listener crowd, when you sign up for the paid Voyagers paid sponsorship of the program, you get bonus information. We're not even Jeff, you teasing folks because we know that there's ways for us to like this is the one place where this is math and we can show you the math. So now as we sort of wrap it up and say that's it, that's all, that's everything, and we'll move into the paid section. Before we do that piece, is there ways that you would like for folks to try to find you out there so that if they want to learn more about your big brain and how you go about doing all the things that you do, how can they find you?
Thank you so much for that, Roger. Yeah, so I'm out there on the social media thing, uh, Instagram, all those depreciation doctor. I think on so my daughter, who spent 7 years in the Coast Guard, came out and was our 38th employee. She's helping me get into this social media realm. Her name is also Melissa, but I think on TikTok I'm depreciation docked. I think I ran out of spaces for that tagline.
Okay.
But I'm all over the place. My email address is jdh at costsegstudies.com if you want to reach out. We do offer for Roger's colleagues, Stewart's
Stewart,
here,
yeah.
we'll offer a complimentary assessment, whether that's for buildings you currently own or buildings you're looking to acquire. We can give you that complimentary estimate of tax benefit before anybody spends a nickel. So, and it's not one of these, you just plug it in and 4 minutes later, somebody's offering you, "Oh, here's your cost seg, it's done already." Well, that's an IRS,
Yeah. Yeah. We
audit
don't
waiting to happen.
we don't
So,
we're not advocating for the virtual, no, people don't go to the place, like, what are we even talking about? So,
right,
that's cool.
exactly.
Jeff, dude, I'm as always, you crushed it just like always. Alright, so now just the Voyagers are hanging out. The Voyagers, they pay me $500 a year, and we give them extra stuff, right? So,
Awesome.
uh, how how so the first thing that stewards always ask me, like, when we talk about our short-term rental, right? So, our social circles are following us online, and they're like, "Hey, you guys bought that house in Sedona. That looks really sweet. Tell me more about this tax thing," right? So we immediately have to, like, try to articulate what we've done and what the benefit was, and you should see the reaction on the faces of the people. They literally think that we're lying to them. So, I know as the person who's now completed the process that has confidence that I've done enough to guard against this, but why what is it about the way that we do with people like Jeff at MSC that guards us the most we possibly can be guarded against being audited? Like, what's the explanation?
So there's a couple of things going on there. We've been doing it since the beginning of the industry. We're part of the overall association called it's also called tax dorks, but it's the American Society of Cost Segregation Professionals, ASCSP. And one of our partners is the president of that association currently. So she's smoking in terms of knowledge and what she does. She really knows this stuff at a level that's way beyond even what I know. And I'm pretty good with this stuff. Ashley Sullivan goes way beyond what I've got. So with that knowledge, um, you can't prevent an audit, but what you can do is have in place things that will enable you to maintain the deductions that you've claimed. Part of that is you want to make sure that you've done actual site visits. You don't want this virtual site visit thing because the IRS says specifically you need to have a quality study done by qualified professionals with doing actual site visits because the IRS cannot confirm was that um, was that virtual site visit done at 123 Main Street or was it done at 456 Main Street or was it done in an AI studio? And because the IRS cannot confirm any of the above, they say virtual site visits are out and disallowed. And then what will happen, and people don't get this, is that it's not going to be they hit send on the e-file and 15 minutes later they get notified, hey, you're getting audited. It's not that.
No,
It's going to be 2 or 3 or 4 years later.
right,
And then you're getting whacked because now you didn't pay those taxes
right.
3 years ago,
Yep.
and you've got penalties, and you've got interest that's been compounding at some ungodly rate like 18 to
Yeah,
22%.
it's you're getting the book thrown at you is literally what everybody feels like. You're just getting the book thrown at you at that point, right?
Right. And I had one guy recently tell me, he goes, "Oh, well, this other company that's offering us that if we do get audited, they'll come in and fix it then." And and I was like, "Oh, so you think the IRS is just going to let you get your hand caught in the cookie jar and say, 'Oh, okay, you go fix it now, bro.'" No. That's not allowed. Once you're under audit, you're stuck there. So that's kind of the scenario there. You want to have real free audit support if it's needed, because some of the folks out there on social media say, "Oh, we've got free audit support." But if you actually read the engagement letters, they say they provide free audit support to the field agent, who is the
Mm,
first person at the door from the IRS. And she goes, "Hey, Roger, you've got a big deduction here. What happened?" And you're going to say, "Oh, we did a cost seg." She'll say, "Oh, can you send it?" And you will. And then she's gonna say, "Oh, thank you for sending this. We're gonna have the IRS engineers look everything over, and they'll get back to you with questions." And there went your free audit support. Now you're on the hook under their contract for 3 to $600 an hour.
yeah,
We don't
see?
play that game. Ours is real free audit support. Um, those are the bigger things, and the fact that our reports do deliver every single item in the building, not just the accelerated ones, which is how, going back to our conversation about those bathrooms in the apartment versus the short-term rental, how you get to take the write-offs when those bathrooms end up in the dumpster down the
Mhm.
road. So
Okay.
those are the 2
So
things.
I'm the jokester in the family. So obviously, like to me, the way I answered the question, just so you know, and you gave a very articulate answer to how I would just say, like, well, I just pay the people that usually are bought by the people who make way more money than me. And I pray that they're making smart choices and that by picking those people too, that I have less of a chance of getting in trouble.
Right.
That's literally like to me, what we're trying to present to the stewards is like, don't go try to figure this crap out for yourself. Because if you come to appreciate the operators that I'm introducing into the ecosystem, then you can build an element of trust that says, all right, I've interacted with a handful of these people and I keep getting good experiences. One would expect that I can start to gravitate towards trusting the recommendations that are being given, right? And to me, what makes the community great is like I fully expect Jeff Hiatt to stick around and be a part of this community so that if anybody wants to know more about it, regardless of whether you go find Jeff or not, Jeff's here. So if you want to know more, ping Jeff. Be like, "Hey, Jeff, like, I wanna talk to you about this," right? And that's supposed to be what the power of the community is because here's the other thing I wanna ask you. You know, you and I go and we go to the boardroom quarterlies and we sit in front of these people who are operating, really successful businesses, and when I first started at boardroom 2.5 years ago, the attitude in the room was a lot different than it is today. And there's socioeconomic and political forces that are creating uncertainty in investing across the board, really. What's your take on that topic? Like, what are you seeing right now from your vantage point when it comes to that?
In terms of, like,
Like,
tax laws and things like
does
that,
does
or
it does it seem like deals are still flying around and like, there's not much caution, or is there like, no, people are underwriting stuff like crazier, harder than they've ever done? Like, what are you seeing as a reaction to like just the market condition right now?
well, as I mentioned before, we're a lagging. So the transactions we're doing today for our, let's say, pipeline are items that closed some time ago.
Mhm.
So, um, interestingly enough, I'm hearing more and more from folks in the boardroom and other direct communication channels, i.e., where we're going to the end user and presenting in front of them, that deals don't pencil. That's the classic line. Deals don't pencil. And you're right, there is more of that out there, that people are saying things just don't pencil right now. Now, that's usually said by somebody that's focused on one asset class. Because if they're only on one asset class and it's the prices are going up and up and up, then bam, all of a sudden, they're in a situation where they're going, we can't buy this apartment because it doesn't work at this
Right.
point.
Right.
But if they were to shift their focus to some other asset class, it could work. Deals could still happen. We're that's when we're going direct to the end user, like like the boardroom, as opposed to when we are getting opportunities in from CPA firms, which is our typical way to market is through CPAs, and they say, "Hey, Jeff, this guy just bought this." You know, the accountant's not commenting on does it pencil or not. They're just
Sure.
saying the guy bought
Already
it.
been
The
bought.
deal
Yeah.
is done. Do the cost seg. Um, do the cost seg and shut up, Jeff.
Do do your
So,
job. Just do your job.
yeah, yeah, oh yeah, that's yeah. So anyway, um, but one of the funny parts of the tax code is it's always said, not always, it's recently been said that these tax law changes about bringing bonus back in at 100% is now permanent. Well, it's permanent, until the next administration comes along and says, that ain't permanent anymore. We're going to
Oh,
undo
right.
that permanent thing. And so it's a good thing that it's now at least got some runway in front of it, but it can always change. And that's the way the
Yeah.
tech laws are. So,
And albeit from us to sit on the sidelines while we're waiting for them to decide when that's going to happen because so much opportunity exists in the meantime that we need not well, it probably will end sometime.
yeah, so what?
So,
It's
so
here today.
right.
And the cool thing is with it is that even if you bought that's one thing we didn't talk about, and maybe this is for the what do you
In
call
the
them,
edit,
Voyager?
the
Um,
Voyagers. Yeah.
the Voyagers, or wherever you wanna put it, you can step back in time. So you might have some stewards out there that already own properties, and they're going, "Oh my gosh, how did I miss this? How did my accountant miss this?" Well, they can go back without amending and grab the deductions they could have taken in the past. So that's part of what we offer there. On that note, um, what happens is if they bought the property in 2018, they still get to go back to 18 and grab the 100% bonus that was in place then. The way it was set up initially was that bonus was going to stair step down or sunset, as the tax folks call it. It was gonna stair step down beginning at the end of 22. So from 17 through
Yeah.
22, it was
Right.
100%, then it was gonna go down to 80, then 60, then 40. Well, in end of 23, there was a movement afoot to bring it back to 100%. And it made it through the House, but it never made it through the Senate. And then in October of 23, all of the election rhetoric heated up and nobody was playing nice in the sandbox down in DC. So it just stayed. And then it went from 60 to 40 in the beginning of 25. But then Trump bought it back at 100 last July, about a year ago, almost today. So,
Yeah. Right. Well, I, you know, here's uh, maybe this is the first time I've said this on the program, but if you hang around with me, you'll hear me talk about it a lot. And I think you can echo this for me because this is something that you and I both witness. I don't care about your damn politics, frankly, because the people in the room that you and I hang around in where all the money moves around, they don't care about politics. What they care about is how to win given the current situation.
that's
Period.
ultimately the deal.
Period. So the only thing that we all know is that the situation is always changing. And so you constantly have to be recalibrating around what winning looks like in the new environment, not waiting for the environment to suit your objective because it doesn't work out that way almost ever. Now,
You're
here's what's
absolutely right.
even more interesting though, Jeff, and you and I both know that for a hot minute, you could be an idiot and still make your investments make money for you in real estate. What really has changed is that's not the play right now. You have to be smart, you have to be savvy, and you actually have to know your numbers. Because if you don't know your numbers, then you don't really know how much or how little you're losing. And if you
You're
don't
right.
know how much or how little you're losing, you don't know that you need to pivot. You don't know that you need to evolve. You don't know anything. And if it is a more difficult environment for investing, which I agree it is, there's actually better returns right now than almost any other time I've been investing, but you just have to work harder to find them. Right.
You're right.
And
You,
so,
you, you,
and I mean, you please, like, they don't
no,
want to hear
you're
it from
dropping
them.
bombs. That's the deal.
They're tired of hearing it from me. They wanna hear it from other people, like, it's just harder. That's all.
Well, one of the things that I find is that if you're not in the entrepreneurial environment all the time, like I am, like you are, um, a lot of people end up, unfortunately, getting, as it's everybody knows it, the analysis paralysis. They're like waiting for, well, what about this? Well, oh, what if, what if the septic field is, contaminated, whatever. There's always something that isn't perfect. And
Yeah.
so people need to not allow that to, don't let not perfect kill a deal, because maybe it's just there's a little money that needs to get thrown at it. But like we're talking about Stewart's with some dough and some assets behind them, maybe they can just throw a little bit of money to it, fix the problem, whatever the imperfection they perceive, put in a better kitchen appliance ensemble,
100%.
whatever it is,
Create
but
value instead of trying to buy it.
dude,
That's the
because
difference.
when you're buying the value, that means, excuse me, when you're paying a premium
That's what you're
for
talking
everything
about.
to have already been done, the guy you're buying from is getting the dough, not you. It's so much better. And my wife and I do this all the time. If we can buy the property that needs the elbow grease, all the better. That's what you're doing in freaking Sedona, right? You're putting in the elbow grease. Yeah, it's a pain in the tail. Yeah, you've got contractor calls. Yeah, you got to, I don't know if Arizona has ledge, but up in New England, there's always ledge. Their contractor hit ledge. Hey, hit a ledge. You got to blast it or whatever you got to do with it. So, do you guys have ledge or do you guys just have sand? I don't know. What's
It's just
what's the soil like?
super hard red rock that they use the machine that was like the jackhammer into the ground to make the
Yeah,
pool.
with on the big excavator thing. I want
Yeah.
to do that. I want to use one of those
Yeah.
sometime, but
Yeah, it'd be great. For that, I'm incredibly grateful, and I've been obviously incredibly grateful for getting to know you and, reaping the benefit of your expertise.
you know, and I'll talk to you later.
See you, Jeff.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fun. See ya.